Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. I am a garden author and columnist who lives in Spokane, Washington, and I am crazy about growing vegetables. Now, this year has been the most challenging year for me ever, and that's because of three things. First of all, we're in the middle of an exceptional drought, so it is very dry here. Also, the temperatures have been extreme with highs up to 111 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is way too hot. And we're also in the middle of wildfire season. It's very smoky. You might notice the light looks a little bit odd. And so it is so incredibly smoky around here that I've been having to limit my time outdoors to a minimum. Now, all of this can impact how our vegetables grow. So today I wanted to talk about blossom end rot, what it is, what it isn't, and how to keep it from happening in your garden. So what is blossom end rot anyway? Well, first of all, it is not a disease and it's not caused by insects. It's actually a nutritional disorder that impacts the development of fruits on certain types of vegetables. You're probably the most familiar with it on tomatoes, but did you know it can also impact eggplants, peppers, watermelons, and squash? So it isn't just limited to tomatoes. So let me explain how it happens. Under normal circumstances, the roots of a plant take calcium from the soil, move it up into the plant, and it goes to the developing fruits. If that doesn't happen for some reason, the fruits will not develop normally because they absolutely must have calcium in order to grow. Blossom end rot almost never impacts small types of tomatoes like cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes like the ones you're looking at here. It more frequently affects paste tomatoes, the types that you use for making sauce and salsa, so those large elongated tomatoes and some of the larger regular types of tomatoes. When conditions aren't ideal, the roots aren't able to move calcium to the fruits, and this is how they react. Do you see that brown end on the bottom of that tomato? Yeah, it's pretty ugly, isn't it? The good news is that more often than not, later developing fruits usually won't have blossom end rot. But let me also show you what it looks like on a zucchini plant, because that's pretty ugly too. What can cause this lack of calcium? You might think it's a lack of calcium in the soil, but believe it or not, that is almost never the case. The most common cause is infrequent or insufficient watering. Calcium will only move from consistently watered soil into the roots and up into the plants. Drought conditions and heat waves can certainly be a cause because it means the soil is drier than usual. It's always important for gardeners to increase the amount of water we give to our plants as the temperatures heat up during the summer. If you cultivate around the base of your plants and damage the roots, that will also impact their ability to transport calcium from the soil up into the plants. What's another cause? If you repeatedly feed your tomatoes or other fruiting plants high nitrogen fertilizer, the plants will have lush, leafy growth, and guess where the calcium goes? Yep, right into the leaves rather than the fruits. Another thing I've learned through my research on blossom end rot is that if we transplant our tomato seedlings into the garden when the soil is still relatively cold, this makes them more susceptible to blossom end rot. I don't entirely understand the rationale behind this, but I did want to pass it along. So we have to be patient when planting our tomatoes and other warm season crops in the spring. The ideal soil temperature for planting tomatoes, for example, is about 65 degrees. So what can we all do as gardeners to either prevent or reduce blossom end rot from happening to our plants? First and foremost, water consistently. And check your soil frequently. Just poke your finger into the soil down to the second knuckle See what the soil feels like. It should be lightly moist, not bone dry, that's for sure. And remember, you're going to have to adjust the amount of time that you water as the summertime temperatures heat up. Place mulch around the base of your plants. This is going to do two things. First of all, it will help the soil retain moisture, and second of all, it makes it harder for weeds to grow, and that's pretty cool. I like to use grass clippings from our lawn because we don't use any herbicides on it like weed and feed, so it's safe to use in the vegetable garden. Other suitable materials would be weed-free straw or shredded leaves. But mulch cannot be underestimated because it is so helpful. Avoid using a lot of high nitrogen fertilizers. So how do you know if a fertilizer is high in nitrogen? You want to look at the label because all fertilizer packages will have 3 numbers on them. The first number represents the amount of nitrogen, the second is phosphorus, and the third is potassium. So you can see this is a high nitrogen fertilizer. So you want to avoid using it excessively after your plants have been transplanted out into the garden. Don't cultivate around the roots of your plants because you might damage them, and that would in turn impact their ability to move calcium from the soil up to the plants and into the fruits. I frequently see posts on social media about blossom end rot, and a lot of times folks will reply and say, oh, you need to put Epsom salts in the soil, you need to add eggshells to the soil, you need to add calcium to the soil. But that isn't the solution. The problem is that something is impacting the root's ability to transport calcium up into the plants, and more often than not, it's irregular or insufficient watering. Another thing that some folks will recommend is a foliar calcium spray. The problem is that when you spray the leaves don't have the ability to move the calcium into the developing fruits. So that is also not going to solve the problem. I mentioned earlier that blossom end rot is generally not caused by a lack of calcium in the soil. But there is an exception to this, and I think you'll agree it makes sense. If you grow tomatoes, let's say, or any other of the fruiting vegetables that I mentioned that are impacted by blossom end rot, and every single year you have problems with blossom end rot, yet you are great about providing your plants with the amount of water they need, then it's time for a soil test. You need to find out what is the level of calcium in my soil, and is that the problem? So I don't want to say that it's never the problem that there isn't enough calcium in the soil, but it is rarely the problem. I thought I'd end this video with some normally developing tomatoes. So what you're looking at here, both the green ones and the orange ones, are Chef's Choice orange. They are hands down my favorite slicing tomato. There's no sign of blossom end rot, and I can't wait to harvest those first orange ones. Okay, I know that's a lot of information that I shared with you today, but I do hope it was helpful. Blossom end rot is such a frustrating disorder. Hopefully now you know more about it than you did before. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Happy gardening.